Greetings on behalf of the Troup County School System. You've tuned in today to Spotlight on Education, and I'm your host, Tina Duckett. This is a great forum for you to learn more about our school system, our staff, our programs, and our students. And we also have a special guest joining us today. We're pleased to have Dr. Cole Pugh. He is our school superintendent. Thank you, Dr. Pugh, for joining us.
Hello, how are you?
Hi,
glad to be
well.
here.
Glad to have you here today. Well, we know that you are not a new superintendent, but relatively new to the Troup County Schools.
Yes.
I think you joined the school system in 2011, is that correct?
I started work officially on February the 1st of 2011, and my family followed me in June of 2011. They had to stay in Texas so my two children could finish the school year there, but we're all here and we're happy to be here.
Okay, well, how has it been thus far?
It's been really good. When I first came here, I started interviewing people individually and in small groups and asking what the strengths of Troup County were, and almost everyone I talked to said it was people. And I have found that to be true in the time that I've been here. Starting with the Board of Trustees, they've been really good to work with. We have good employees, good students, parents, and then we have a very supportive business community. So Troup County is a good place to be, and good things are happening.
Well, we're glad you're here. And but you've been in education for some time now. Would you care to share your journey into this career?
I started my career in education as a teacher and coach in 1973 in a little small rural East Texas school district. And I've been a teacher coach for about 8 years. I was a principal for 2 years, and I've been a superintendent for 30 years. And during that time, I've worked in districts as small as 200 students and as large as 15,200. Some were poor and some were wealthy and some were rural, and the last district I worked in Texas, we could see downtown Fort Worth from our district. So varied background, so that's a little bit about my background in education.
Well, you said you started out in 1973. I won't even tell you how old I was.
Okay.
Okay, so tell us about your first day. I hear that it was somewhat eventful when you first started with Troup County School System.
It was. I was sworn in at 8:30 in the morning, and I had never been sworn in my career because that wasn't required in the state where I came from, but it was required here. So I was sworn in at 8:30, and I think it was Don Miller who shook hands and said, "Welcome to Troup County, and oh, by the way, we have a $5.2 million deficit that we're dealing with for next year."
Oh.
So I was sworn in at 8:30, and then we started a budget meeting at 9 o'clock with a budget committee composed of teachers and school employees. And it lasted more than 3 hours, so I got to hear people talk about the deficit and some possible ways to deal with that. And so that was my first morning in Troup County School System.
Okay, now Don Miller, you referenced him. He was the...
Don Miller was the CFO at the time. He has since retired. And are we now talking about the slide on the screen?
Yes, let's go ahead and talk about some of the...
Well, after that $5.2 million deficit for FY12, that was followed by $7.2 million for FY13, $4 million last year as we went through the budget, and now we've already estimated that the deficit for next year will be between $2.5 and $3 million. And deficits, when we first estimate, have a way of going up because there are things that happen later that we didn't know about. Now, if I were the average citizen in Troup County and I was not associated with the school system, I would wonder why every year I read in the newspaper that the school system has a deficit.
Yes.
And I would think, well, you know, you'd think that superintendent and the board administration could figure this out and they wouldn't have any more deficits. So one of the things I want to do is explain to the viewing audience why we have a deficit every year.
I think that's important.
I do too.
Yes, please share.
On the screen, in 1985, you go back in history, the state of Georgia, the legislature passed a law called the QBE, or the Quality Basic Education Act.
Okay.
And that was a law that created a formula to send money to Georgia school systems. Now, notice in the title it says basic education. So if that law funded a basic education, then the state of Georgia is underfunding a basic education, and let me explain why that is, why I make that statement.
Okay.
On the slide, you'll notice these are called state austerity reductions. An austerity reduction is a cut to the formula. So from 1985 until the early 2000s, things were okay. But in 2002 and 2003, the austerity reduction started. So you'll notice in FY03, there was a small reduction to the formula. And then in FY09, there was a pretty significant, and in FY10, things changed dramatically.
Yes.
So for the last 5 years, there's been a very significant reduction in the formula. And a long time ago, I heard a wise person say, the trend is your friend. So I would like to say that FY14 is the last time this is going to happen. But if you look at that trend, it says we're going to have significant austerity reductions into the future unless something changes.
Until the economy turns around, and we don't know when that will be, do we?
And I want to focus specifically on FY13 and 14. In this slide, this is a little better illustration of how you get an austerity reduction. In FY13, that QBE formula said that the Troup County School System should receive $56.3 million. But the state actually sent us $47.1. So there is the $9.1 million austerity reduction or formula adjustment that was on the previous slide. And then on the next slide, this is not shown on the QBE reduction slide, but our underfunding is even more serious than that. Troup County is a large place. We have over 400 square miles. And as you might guess, it takes quite a bit of money to fund the transportation system. So in FY13, we spent $6.1 million for transportation. The state gave us $1.4 million. So that was underfunded by $4.7 million. And on the next slide, it kind of combines those two. So that was our net shortfall for FY14 was $12.9 million. So that's basically why we have a deficit every year, is we have to deal with the shortfall in funding from the state level.
Yes, and it seems that it's in the QBE, the transportation, and then there was the
well, one year there was equalization, but that was not a factor this year.
Okay,
now,
so QBE
to be
and
more specific, this is some information I received a few weeks ago from a group called Empower Ed Georgia. The FY14 austerity reduction for our system was $8.2 million, and they broke that down into a little more understandable terms. So this is $675 per student in our system, or $16,800 per classroom. So that's what our reduction is for FY14.
And wow, that's a real significant amount. And how does the school system and the leadership address the deficit?
Well, I have a list of options here, and there are no good options on there. I'll go ahead and just say that. But the first option is to consolidate or close campuses. Now, unfortunately, for the last 3 years, we have had to do that. We do not think that's an option this year, because for those 3 years, we had vacant space or capacity to move students to, and we no longer have that capacity. So we don't think we're going to be able to close the campus this year. We can reduce personnel positions, and we've reduced over 200 positions over the time that I've been in the district. And the reason you have to reduce personnel is more than 88% of our budget is personnel. So if you're going to do a significant reduction, unfortunately, you have to look there.
Yes.
I would back up and say that from closing those 3 campuses, we saved about $3.3 million, and that's an annual savings from this point forward. It was not just a one-time thing. We can also reduce programs and services. The next thing on the list is to reduce budgets, and we reduced, I think, almost $4 million 2 years ago, and then almost $2 million last year. So every year you go back and look at budgets, it's harder to make those reductions. We can also increase revenue. We'll say more about that in a minute. We can limit salary increases. We can have leave without pay days. Now, currently, the teachers in our system have 2 leave without pay days, and those employees on 240-day contracts, like administrators, including myself, have 5 leave without pay days. And that's a little less than some of the surrounding and other Georgia systems, but to me, leave without pay days is a short-term fix to a problem, and it's not a long-term solution. And then there are other options. I did a presentation the other night for a group, and I asked them, out of all those options, if you had a child in our school system, which one would you want me to pick? And one of them said, I'd like you to pick other, and then I'd like to know what that is.
Right.
But
right.
That's the same list we had last year, and it's the same list we have this year, and it's the same list we're going to have next year. So unfortunately, I know to the general public there's nothing on there they really would like for us to choose, but we have a responsibility as administration and board to deal with budget deficits. We aren't like the federal government. We can't print our own money,
right.
and we have to have a balanced budget. So we have a responsibility to deal with this issue, and I think we've done a pretty good job dealing with that over several years.
Because the budget has been balanced.
Yes, it has.
Remains balanced. Okay. Well, talk about the reserve balance.
Okay. School system should have a fund or reserve balance, and this chart begins in FY03. At that point, the Troup County School System had almost no reserve balance. They decided, the CFO and the board and the district decided we really need some fund balance, so we're going to make some decisions over a period of time to build that up. The red line on this chart is at 30 days. The state recommends that a district have 30 days in reserve balance. This is so you can start school and make payroll before revenue starts coming in. It's so you don't have to borrow money to start school. And so over a period of time, the district built up the fund balance, and you'll notice in FY11 it got to its highest point.
Mm-hmm.
At that point, and this was, everything there was planned up to that point. Everything after that was planned also. So as part of dealing with the deficit, we said we have a little extra fund balance, we can use part of that. Now, a few citizens last year said, well, why don't you just use your fund balance for a couple of years and don't do anything else? Well, if you did that, you would go back to where the district was in '03 and start over again. So we are almost to the point where we may have to start borrowing money to start the school year. We don't really want to do that and have to pay interest. So the fund balance is about as low as it needs to be.
Right.
But I thought that would be interesting for the community to know.
Okay. Now, has there been discussion with the school board about increasing the millage rate, the school property taxes, if you will?
Yes, one of the options that's listed on one of the slides that we just looked at was increasing revenue. And one of the ways to do that is to increase the millage rate. Now, I know there's a lot of numbers and they're pretty small on this slide, but if you go over to the left side for 3 years, you'll notice a little red bar up at the top.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the yellow part of this millage rate is the maintenance and operations or maintenance part of the millage rate. That red part was a bond rate. So back in those years, they had to have the bond portion to pay for facility improvements.
Okay.
Now, at some point, the state of Georgia put in the e-spliced elections. And I want to say, coming from a state that didn't have e-spliced, it is a great thing for schools.
Okay.
So the reason there is no longer a bond is because you have e-spliced. And it's around 2005, the district set the millage rate at 18.85, and it has not changed since then. This year we were able to hold that millage rate again at the same level, but again in the future we're going to have to look at that as we deal with deficits. And you're going to reach a point where you've cut everything you really can cut, and you're going to have to probably raise revenue. So we're not going to guarantee the public that that's going to stay 1885 forever, because we're probably going to have to look at that.
But as of right now, and for 10 consecutive school years, it has not increased.
It has not increased.
Okay, well that's good news, I know, for the public to hear.
Yes.
And with less resources for students, meaning money, mm-hmm. and less funding, which
and less personnel.
And less personnel, it has the potential to affect student achievement.
It does.
Has student achievement suffered in any way in Troup County schools?
So far it has not. I'm actually glad to tell the public that we've had increases in student achievement in many areas in spite of all those reductions. So we've tried to use the budget process to focus the resources we have left on the important areas in our school system. So we have retained curriculum coaches to write curriculum for us, which is critical to improving student achievement. There's really not time in this show to talk about why that is. I might want to come back and talk about that at another time.
We'd love to have you.
We've also retained funding for professional development because that's how a school system improves. So the first slide I want to show there is one of the most impressive ones I've seen since I came to Troup County. And what this says, there is a required test called the CRCT that's given to all Georgia school systems. And in 2008, Troup County students outscored or equaled the state, and I think that's 14% of the time. It's hard to see that far over there. But that increased in 2013 to 70% of the time. So I think that's a significant increase in student achievement. And that was done during a time when there were significant austerity cuts and budget cuts and a lot of other difficult decisions being made in the Troup County school system.
Okay.
The next slide focuses not on the CRCT test, but end of course tests given to high school students. So this shows the Troup County school system is on the left and it is in green, and then the right is the state of Georgia. So on those high school tests listed at the bottom of the screen, they're 9th grade literature, American literature, math 2, biology, physical science, economics, and U.S. history. We significantly outscored the state of Georgia. So we're proud of those achievements. It speaks well for our employees and our students and our community that we could do that.
And Dr. Pugh, before we go on to talking about graduation rates, because I do want to address that,
Okay.
We do have a little time to talk about the importance of aligning curriculum, and
Okay.
I know that is one of your areas of expertise. And so would you speak to the public about the importance of aligning curriculum to state standards?
Right. At the end of most school years, a lot of our students have to take a standardized test. It's a state test. It can be CRCT, or it can be end of course, or it can be another test. Well, if we want students to be successful on that test during the year, we have to teach them what the topics that will be on those tests. Now, some people might say, well, that's teaching to the test. Well, it is not. You cannot teach to the test in Georgia because they don't show you the test. Now, I will tell you, in Texas, they released tests after they were given so we could see an old test, but you can't even see an old test in Georgia.
And I imagine other states do the same
Yes.
thing, don't they?
But we are teaching the curriculum to prepare students to do well on the test at the end of the year. So the subject matter that we teach in the classroom has to align. The instructional materials that we use during the year have to align, and the activities that teachers use in the classroom have to align in order for students to do well on the test at the end of the year. So I think the data here shows that we're doing a better job of curriculum alignment in the Troup County school system.
And that is extremely important because state standards tend to change frequently, don't they?
They do, and this, what we're doing helps all students. It's not for any particular group, it helps all students. The new Common Core curriculum has come into Georgia. It's become part of the state curriculum. And also the assessments have changed and in some cases became more rigorous. At the same time, the poverty rate in Troup County has gone up. So while we have increased poverty and reduced resources, we have done better in many areas of academic performance.
Well, that's good news, even
Yes.
though it's being opposed by other factors that we just can't control right now.
Right.
We're doing our part as a school system along with our parents and business partners, so that's very important. But why don't you share information about the graduation rate? Is it improving?
It is. In 2004, according to the slide you're looking at, the graduation rate in Troup County was about 61.7%. There was a county-wide strategic plan developed. A lot of different entities, including Troup County School System, decided to focus on improving that rate. And it increased in 2010 to 80%. So this was an 18.3% increase during that time. Now, about this time, the state changed the way they calculated the graduation rate. This was so that all states around the country would do the same thing. In 2011, when they changed the calculation, our graduation rate, according to the calculation, dropped. But that didn't mean fewer students were graduating. It was just a different calculation. Between 2011 and 2012, our graduation rate increased more than 10%, while the state of Georgia increased about 2%. So we saw another increase that outpaced the state in graduation rate.
And congratulations on that to all of the hardworking teachers and students, parents, and business partners who get behind the
Many
school
people
system.
made that possible.
Yes, most certainly. Well, we have a couple of extra minutes here, and I'd like for you to share with our viewing audience information about the goals of the school system. How do you see the school system moving forward?
Well, we actually rewrote our goals a couple of years ago using a advisory task force composed of teachers and employees and citizens. So we worked on those. Our number one goal and the job that we're here to do primarily is to increase student achievement. So we want to continue to do that. Another goal is to have a safe and secure environment, which is important. We're looking at that and seeing ways to maintain a safe environment in our schools. We want to include the parents and business community in our educational system.
Yes.
And then the last one is to operate in an efficient and productive manner.
Yes.
So as our resources go down, we've got to continue to look at ways to do more with less is really what it amounts to, and I think we've been able to do that. So we use a rather innovative budget process that helps us do that. And that's kind of beyond the time frame of our show to say a whole lot about that.
Right, but it's called, what is it?
Performance-driven budgeting. So we've used that for a couple of years, and our employees do that very well. And so I think the results show that we've done more with less.
Well, Dr. Pugh, it has been a pleasure having you on the show today. I do hope that you will come back.
I will.
and join us. And to you, our viewing audience, we're glad that you have tuned in today. Dr. Pugh, if our audience wants to learn more about the school system, who should they contact? How can they learn more?
The district has a website, which you are very instrumental in producing. And the website is www.troup.org, and there's general information like the school calendar. There's very detailed presentations on what we've done with the budget and what we've done with facilities. And so I would encourage the audience to go to that website, and also the district phone number is on the website, and if they want to call anyone in the system, we'll try to answer their questions or hear what they have to say.
Well, thank you again for joining us and sharing all of that very important information. And to you, our viewing audience, we thank you for tuning in. And don't forget to like us on Facebook. We do have a Facebook page, and we are at Troup County School System, so please look us up. Until next time, make it a great day.